Hello and welcome to another episode of The Beat, Black Experiences in Art and Theater. My name is Sydney Edwards.
And I'm Talib Hardy.
And today we have a very special guest with us, Robert Barry Fleming, who is the Artistic Director at Actors Theatre of Louisville and just such an amazing creative in our community. Robert, welcome and thank you so much.
Thank you, Sydney. Thank you, Talib. Glad to be here.
Yes. Okay, so we'll start off real easy, Robert. Why don't you just, tell us about yourself, what you feel like your specialty is in the theater, if you feel like you have one, and kind of what you're doing right now.
Sure. I serve as the Executive Artistic Director at Actors Theatre of Louisville, and those responsibilities are something like a CEO of a company that works with a really remarkable leadership staff, as well as the rest of our production staff and other folks in admin in the organization to shepherd our mission, vision, and values. And it's a great opportunity to both be of service in this community. We are an arts and culture organization, a social enterprise that really are invested in multi-platform entertainment. So we have a way of being able to share our stories on everything from radio, podcasts to audio, visual experiences, and in-person and theater experiences as well. And I think part of the joy of what we get to do is connect with many partners who have great expertise in what they do and try to really actualize our community in the best way that we can in being of service in that way. So that's a great joy, and that's a great part of what I get to do. I also am excited that we get to not only be in our communities of color and historically marginalized communities that have previously maybe not had their stories centered, but we're also in the JCPS partnership with Justice Now, and also getting an opportunity to expand that work in the XR kind of digital spaces with virtual reality and other augmented reality experiences, mixed reality experiences. And so we get to do that both in our artistry as well as our kind of educational and learning engagement. And part of that's also I direct. I also choreograph.
Yes.
And, have an opportunity to also teach and continue to mentor through those venues and those disciplines. So I have a kind of multi-hyphenate identity in that way, and that's a lot of fun to do.
I definitely identify with that, Robert. I want to be when I grow up. I want to do all the things. Talib, yeah.
So before you got to be able to do all the things in the world, how did you get started in this?
Yeah, when did the bug bite you?
The
Pretty much bug. Like all folks, I think it was in performance. When I was a youngster, university professor, Dr. Winona Fletcher at Kentucky State College needed a Travis for her production of A Raisin in the Sun, and that was my first opportunity to be on a stage. I played Travis and just got bit by the bug, and as you say, and really just found out those collaborations and those connections really affirming and healing and joyful, and a real sense of belonging in this kind of imaginary world that you couldn't have better writing to be, exposed to and around, meditating on the themes that Lorraine Hansberry so skillfully and masterfully explored in that particular classic.
Definitely.
So, starting with Raisin in the Sun,
it's a tall order right there.
Right, it's a tall order. What have been some of your favorite projects, and why have they been your favorites?
Yeah, I think it's pretty much whatever I'm working on at the moment, because it's the thing that, it usually kind of aligns with your own personal growth, your growth as an artist, and that's what I really love about the discipline, that it grows with you, and the deeper you invest in that work, the more intrinsic reward you can get from that work. And that's one of the things I just think I really love most about being a theater artist and being an artist in general, is that you get out of it what you put into it.
Definitely. Okay, Robert, you can answer this from your CEO brain or your director brain or your choreographer brain, however you want to answer it. But what do you feel are some of the misconceptions of what you do in theater?
I think the framing of theater arts as only diversion is something that's a kind of misnomer, that it serves only one purpose, to kind of entertain the bourgeoisie. I think it is a discipline that is one that can help people have a deeper understanding of themselves and the world that they live in, engage in it more fully. Taking the term actor and thinking of that as a person of action as much as a person of doing, as much as playing in imaginary circumstances. I think that's I think play is something that is fundamental to imagination and fundamental to innovation. And so there's a way of talking about play as serious play, as the thing that allows us to continue human progress, or a deeper understanding of how we're connected to all things. It takes some imagination when you're indoctrinated in other ways. So I think that would be one of the biggest misconceptions, that what we do is only that which should be thought of as, fun, only light, only diversionary, rather than it's a essential way that human beings really understand the world in which they live in, and ask themselves existential questions that allow us to be better in community and actualize ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. I get that too. It's definitely like growing up in a family that didn't necessarily bop with me being a theater artist at first. It's very, we don't get the respect, I feel like, right? That a lot of other professions get. To that, like, what do you think, particularly I think about you as in your executive position, what is the hardest part about what you're doing now? Is it, is it something internal? Is it, the pandemic and COVID? Like, what makes it hard?
I think, what we've seen is arts funding has continued to decline, both on a federal and a corporate and foundational and even individual giving. There's still very generous partners who want to support the work that we do. But I think it is hard to get resource for it, for the misconceptions that it is not an essential sector. So I think that makes it tough. I think it's also tough. We've got a lot of dog whistling theatrics that are going on, and people obscure their dissent in the cultural wars that are going on with, sometimes it's like, well, it's just, we want to do something more essential. But I think it's also business as usual sometimes when we're looking at maintaining status quo power structures and assuring that some people have certain kinds of resources and opportunities while others, work in more compromising circumstances in that regard. So I think that's, one of the fundamental challenges, is that it's hard to kind of get authentic, consistent agreement in how valuable the arts are, and the arts as a social enterprise to create equity for all citizens is also something that I think some people have great ambivalence and antagonism to. So that combination is, I think, challenging when you do work that is seeking to examine and meditate and reflect on existential truths about how human nature intercedes in our interactions with one another.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
Speaking to, that human experience and getting to that and all that you've done, can you name like 3 people who have helped you or influenced you in leading towards making that a focus for you in the work that you create?
Yeah, sometimes it's folks and then sometimes it's just folks you admire. I've always been an enormous fan of the late Toni Morrison, the late James Baldwin. They've both been seminal figures who are as creative artists, writers, intellectuals who just are just brilliant kind of assessors of the world. They have been an enormous influence. I'd say Adrienne Marie Brown, whose work in emergent strategy and her worldview has been a really fundamentally impactful way of looking at the world. So there's oftentimes writers and other artists and creatives who I admire from afar and am able to study their work and garner their wisdom that are great influences in how I sort through things. Certainly getting the opportunity to work with George C. Wolfe was a really fundamental growth experience for me, and artists like wonderful late Ron Link, who directed my Broadway debut, and Stand-Up Tragedy was a really foundational experience. A super early one was Dr. Winona Fletcher, who I mentioned was my first director ever, and a neighbor, and just she's just an extraordinary woman who has given so much to African American theater and academic circles, and foundationally really, I think, gave us a sense of who we were as artists in the world, whether it was a child like myself at the time or someone who was a student of hers at Kentucky State University or in University of Indiana. She's just a kind of force of a very generous force of nature. So those are, I'd say, some of the key influencers for me.
Oh, awesome. You know what's so funny? I had a copy of Jelly's Last Jam, right? That's George C. Wolfe. And I just happened to flip the book open one day and I saw your name and I was like, what? That's crazy, because I didn't know.
Yeah.
And so, can you tell us anything about that experience?
Please.
Oh yeah, it was extraordinary, to be a part of a world premiere, and it was such a seminal moment in many people's careers, getting to work with Keith David and Ruben Santiago Hudson and Tanya Pinkins, and these are long-term friends and collaborators who, as they continue to influence the field and revolutionize a lot of the work, there were just so many really gifted parties in that world premiere, and it reminds you that the business is one in which you will have proximity to greatness. You will have the opportunity to learn from so many people and them from you. And you have these wonderful creative exchanges on really seminal projects. But it was a really heady experience. I just remember the closing night of the show. And, it's really heady to be a theater person, and then you're out in LA. We did it at the Martin Taper Forum, and look out in the house, and Eddie Murphy's there, and Robert Townsend, and Denzel Washington's. You hear from, George was like, yeah, Denzel, I thought your work was really good. It's like, what? Denzel? Whoa. Denzel is in proximity of me. It's like that was all kind of heady to just kind of even try to comprehend what was happening. And at the same time, really the fundamental, most important thing was the work itself and the intrinsic reward of learning more about my craft, learning more about what kind of collaborator I wanted to be in the world, and asking these veterans, what can I do to keep growing? Yeah. And, getting their counsel and their thoughts and, and taking some of that advice and really knowing that was probably the most influential part of it all.
Okay, awesome.
Really, I mean, you've had such a successful career and it keeps building on that. Is there anything you wish you had known when you first started that you know now?
I think you learn at just the right time, so nothing pops out in that way. Yeah. I think just knowing that being a lifelong learner and kind of approaching that with a certain level of authentic humility, not the kind of false humility that doesn't allow you to own what you know and own what you have accomplished, but just also knowing that every time you revisit the work, you're kind of starting from zero. You're not starting with your credits or your awards or your who you know or who you didn't know. It's like you're always meeting the work itself and having to, in some ways reinvent your whole process each time out, or at least approach it with what some would say is beginner's mind. If you're not throwing out everything, you are asking questions. It's an investigation and an interrogation into something, and just being humble before that, I think, is something that I've really appreciated, that you never can really rest on your laurels, and nor would you want to, because it's always an opportunity to grow and learn and be a student of life and nature when you do work this way. So I know when I approach it that way, it has a deeper satisfaction than when I am looking at all the externals of where is this going to get me, or fundamentally not being present with the work itself, but being too much in the future and too much of the past just doesn't tend to lead to profound experience. I think it's just being where you are moment to moment and being there as generously as you can.
Awesome. That really leads into like our wrap up questions really well. One of the things I wanted to ask you is, how do you, at this level that you are, continue to learn and stay on top of things and roll with the trends? How do you keep up? I have trouble keeping up. So
I do. I read a lot and I try to listen a lot, to kind of hear the connections and the disconnections between what I am garnering from other people's analysis about the world we're living in, and often asking myself, how does that relate to the work that I do in the arts and culture sector? And similarly, I think learning to listen and translate what you're hearing from people, because they'll often say things, but you have to decode what's within that, or decipher or translate some of that for it to be useful for how you might respond or contribute to, solving challenges or identifying opportunities. And so it's both active listening and really staying very curious about the world you're in, and trying to find all of those connections, I think.
Yeah.
So it's a personal question for me. It is a question on here, and I'm sure everyone who listens to this will have a similar question. What advice would you give someone who wants to pursue a career similar to yours? This is for me.
Yeah. It's interesting because my path is a unique one. And, I think similar to people who I admired, one of my models for how to move forward has always been George C. Wolfe. and yet it's impossible to recreate his path because it's of a different time, and and he had different opportunities, and I have different opportunities. So you can't quite do it like anybody else. But I'd say, identifying essentially, as well as you can at the moment of your, wherever you are developmentally, what's your priority and what's important to you. I would say what I've been maybe most surprised by or most arrested by is the idea of being of service is actually a way of fulfilling more of what I actually want or need, as opposed to a kind of focus on what am I trying to get from me. It's like, it's a different question of how can I be of best service, and really meditating on that through my own relationship with a higher power being the primary way that I try to motor what I do. Like, how can I best be of service? And part of that is taking on faith that I will get what I need to be deeply and fully fulfilled if I make that the priority. Really similar to, I don't try to direct for external approval. I direct and choreograph for the intrinsic realization of what that moment or that story needs. And I think if I am thorough in my work, it is highly likely that it will have a strong external or critical response. But it is a really different focus of, rather than saying, what can I do to get people's approval or critics' approval? I think at some level it's like that can't be the highest goal. The highest goal has to be something that is connected to nature, to the divine, or to the intrinsic process. And then everything else will take care of itself. So that may be two questions, answering two questions of like, what would I want to know is like, if you're focused on an EGOT, I think that is a problematic frame for getting an EGOT. I think it's like, because the EGOT might not be what your journey is really supposed to be about. You may need to be of service in an entirely different way and deeply fulfilled and satisfied on an entirely different path. So it's like you take the best of what you think you want and know, but then I think that kind of meditation or prayer or whatever your spiritual practice is say, just let me be of the most service I can be.
Staying open.
And fulfill that. And I think that kind of connects you to a natural rhythm, the natural world, or the divine, in a way that allows a lot of things to happen that otherwise, you might not even imagine for yourself that big. I think a lot of what's come to me is like, well, I never imagined that.
Right.
I certainly didn't imagine I'm going to run regional theater and so many of the things that I've done, but they have proven to be a really, really good fit. And very, very satisfying work.
Excellent. Yeah, I remember meeting you. I met you back in Cleveland, and I remember just being, enamored with how you operated and moved, and just how open you were to things. And you had and have just such an amazing open vibe, and I think that's just why so many good things come to you. I think it's a beautiful thing. Okay.
I think that is I feel the exact same about you.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so I love to wrap these interviews up with like a couple of silly questions, okay? We're just going to have some fun.
Yes.
Fun. Okay, so Robert, what do you think aliens look like?
Oh, I wish I had a better imagination, but I've been watching that series UFO, and I just have nothing but that big head, big eye, small nose thing in my head. But I hope that they inside are all the things that we hope of angels.
Okay.
You know, because if they are finding their way to us,
Oof.
then they've got technology.
Yeah, they have such a bad rep.
They're misunderstood.
Aliens have such a bad rep. I hope they're angels inside too, Robert. I never thought of that. Is imaginative. What you saying? Let's see. Do you have a go-to karaoke song or a shower song?
Ooh.
Or just song that just pumps you up?
Wow. I had gotten some over the summer, but now I've forgotten what they were. They're usually, you know, you can always do some George Benson or James Ingram, or like something like that, and croak those notes at the top. If you messing them up, you can still kind of get away with it. Mm-hmm. You can strain some of those notes, because that's kind of like James Ingram style. Just I'm 100 ways.
Yes.
Because you can squeeze it out.
You know, you just have fun with it.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
I love James Ingram. Growing up, I was like, that is the best singing ever.
I love it.
All right. I have one silly question. If you could be in any cartoon with your favorite cartoon, who would it be?
I want to say Fat Albert, but also Archer and Big Mouth. Like,
no, Big Mouth.
You watch Resources.
They're so messed up.
They're so messed up.
They're all so messed up. And I was like, I would just love to be that radically messed up. Because you have to be kind of political doing what I do. But they're all so wrong. All of those cartoons are so wrong in so many ways.
And Archer?
Archer. I've been wanting to watch Archer, but I haven't.
Archer is wrong.
But it's hilarious.
Really funny.
Do you want ants? Because that is how you get ants.
I have to be honest, I've only watched 2 episodes. And they are completely separated by season. So I have no idea how these characters ended up in these circumstances, but they really, really make me laugh because they're so politically incorrect.
Yes. I saw the one episode of Big Mouth that was about Florida. That's all I got to say.
Oh my gosh.
That's the one in Florida. Yep, Florida. There you go.
Wrong.
Just wrong.
But
speaking of TV, okay, so my last silly question is, we all watch so much TV during the pandemic, and some of us, are. I definitely have all of my shows. What are you watching? Is there a show you're watching right now that you really love, or something you've watched recently that you really got into?
Yeah, I just finished Yellow Jackets.
Okay, I heard good things.
Yellow Jackets. Man, that is just brilliant. And it's really, I think it's also, not to get serious again, but it's like you've got some indie filmmakers, you've got some playwrights, and they're all collaborating on this platform because, it's harder to do certain kind of theater and it's harder to do certain kind of films, get them funded. So there's just this plethora of talent. And I'm going to tell you, Watchmen, Regina King and Watchmen. Oh my God. I loved me some Watchmen. That was just astounding. And I've always been a big Regina King fan. Yes. But boy, she was good. And Nine Perfect Strangers I really enjoyed. And what was that other one? Was crazy. It was about the hotel. Shoot.
I can't remember. It's on my list.
I think Alfred Molina is going to be in the second season. And I love The Crown. I just you're talking about the pandemic. It's like I really got back into some TV watching during the pandemic. So
as you should.
Love streaming. Streaming.
I have all the streaming stuff. A couple of my friends, Xavier and a couple of our friends got to do the shoot in Cincinnati with Regina King for her Shirley Chisholm movie. I cannot wait for that to come out.
Wow, that's so cool. Yeah. And what was the brilliant one with Ingenue Ellis?
Was it King? Oh wait, not
and Jonathan.
Lovecraft Country.
Lovecraft Country.
Ooh, that was a lot.
Boy, Love me some Lovecraft Country.
It was a lot.
Those were my highlights. Those were my pandemic highlights.
Definitely.
But I will tell you, Yellow Jackets was killer. You gotta check it out.
I'm gonna do it. When I watch it, I'm gonna be like, Robert, I wasn't
ready. For sure.
All right. Well, to wrap up, is there anything that I didn't ask you today that you would like to share?
The only thing I would say is just, Sydney, you're such a wonderful model of generosity, humility, and curiosity. And it's like, I think those are keys to success. And when you see that, you're like, oh, that's gonna really work for them. And if that is not the space that you're operating in, I would just strongly encourage you to find ways that you can cultivate more of that in your engagement with the world and folks in the world, because it goes a long way.
Yeah. Oh, thank you, Robert. Is there anywhere that people can connect with you online? I know you got that awesome podcast if you want to shout it out.
Yeah, we have Borrowed Wisdom. We have an unscripted series. I just would strongly encourage people. I work with a lot of brilliant people at Actors Theatre of Louisville. So when you see that name and you see somebody who's working there,
yes,
you know that you're working and connecting with someone who has meaningful insight in the field and the discipline that they're working in. So keep that on your, just know that is a real resource. And we're here to be of service to this community, and reach out to us, come engage with us. There's a lot of mutually beneficial exchange awaiting if you do.
Definitely, yes. Y'all follow Actors Theatre on Instagram, and check out Borrowed Wisdom on Spotify. That's where I listen to it.
Thank you.
Robert, thank you so much for spending some time with us today. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. You all take good care of yourselves, and wishing you all great things.
Thank you. You take care, man. I'll hope to catch up with you before I dip. I'll call you or something.
I would love it.
All right. You take care. This has been the African American Theater Programs podcast, The Beat, Black Experiences and Art and Theater. Until next time.